probably put in $800 into the online casino, and I had probably wagered another $700 to $800 in sports bets on a home run parlay during baseball season. And I turned around and lost about half of it. I paid half of it to some debt, and then my wife and I had agreed to put some money away, and I blew through that in about 6 days. And that was a substantial amount of money, probably 3 months of income type money.
Today's guest is Joseph Gregory, and he shares his story of gambling addiction and recovery. He went from running a successful business to going through bankruptcy and using gambling as a way to try to pay off debts. But before we get into his story, I have one favor to ask from you. There's so many of you that watch this channel regularly, but you're not yet subscribed. If you could do me the one favor of just hitting that subscribe button, then my promise to you is that I will continue to work hard every single day to spread the message that gambling addiction is real, but so is recovery. Let's get into his story. Joseph, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your story. Tell the people a little bit about yourself to just get us started.
Yeah, so I live in Indiana. I'm a dad of two, been married, got married young, been married for going on 8 years now, got married at 23, had kids young. And so just been in sales, had my own business, been an athlete my whole life. And so that's been a major part of my life. Played baseball through college and then picked up golf competitively. And so I like to spend all my time somewhere involved around sports. That's where I find kind of my release and my outlet. I train salespeople for a living. And so that's been really gratifying just to be able to be a part of other people's successes. My life, I try to make sure that I'm just getting the most time with my family because our time is short here. I always tell my wife and I always say that the days are long, but the years are short.
That's fair enough. And I feel like they've been speeding up as I've been getting a little bit older, but that's a complete aside. So before we got on the call, you had mentioned that a big part of your story was your business and what played out with it over the course of a couple of years. Why don't you take us through that process as it relates to the development of what became your gambling problem?
Yeah, so I think I kind of looked back and really I think for a long time I had a gambling problem and never really labeled it that way. So like even when it goes back to like sport games, like MLB The Show, they have like you can buy virtual packs and stuff. And I always remember with my buddies, like I was always opening those. It was like the thrill of potentially even virtual currency, getting the big card. And so that kind of rolled into adult life. I mean, my wife and I were early in our marriage. It was never that we were putting ourselves in a financial spot, so it never felt like we were doing anything wrong. But I mean, we lived in Milwaukee at the time. We'd go to Brewers games. The casino is one street away. It's like one stretch of road, maybe a mile and a half, and we'd be there twice a week sometimes. And we were young, married, just living it up. Didn't really think anything of it. We'd win some, lose some. It wasn't like a big deal. But we realized as we started getting to a point where it was like, if my mom's like, hey, what are you doing this evening? And I'm like, oh, we're just going to the game. I'd leave out the part about the casino because I felt, maybe we're going, or she'd say, you're going a lot. And I'm like, no, we're fine. Like, I don't want to hear about it. And so I think, looking back, I realized the behavior aspect, there were a lot of things that were okay. We never really looked at it problematically. And then so fast forward into late 2019, probably mid-fall 2019, I always had fascination with sports cards, as being an athlete my whole life. And so I got the idea. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I told my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm going to take 10 grand, start buying product and see what happens. And so wound up lucking out in a way because COVID happened and boomed the online space. And so that whole industry boomed. Well, that whole industry is basically a hidden casino behind sports cards, realistically with, what I was doing and not realizing that was also feeding into the behavior aspect. But I was on the other side of it. I was more like the house, so to say. I was always going to have a win because I was moving the product. My margins were margins. Well, got to a point I was operating the business, grew to a really substantial point, 7-figure revenue generating business. And so that was awesome. But what that came with was capital investment into growth. And so I found outlets to go and get it. Mid 2022, with Fanatics taking over, they changed some distribution channels and a lot of things happened. And so I went from like being on top of the earth to really low. I took on, when I liquidated everything, I had lost so much money. I was 140, 150 grand in the hole. And so I've had another job. And at that point, I wasn't really gambling. I wasn't playing at the casinos. Maybe periodically my wife and I would go. It wasn't ever problematic. When we went, we'd spend a substantial amount of money. But it wasn't like we were gambling all day or, every day, so to say. About May of 2023, one of my coworkers had shown me an online casino. That was the first time I'd ever dabbled in that. And of course, as we all are, we wind up winning the first time. We get you hooked in. And I was working at a card shop, and my hours were crazy. I mean, I was there late nights till 1, 2, 3 in the morning. I had an hour
Mm.
drive home, so I had a ton of time by myself. I'd be at the card shop from 8:30, 9 o'clock at night until 2 in the morning by myself, with nothing more to do than open cards or watch sporting events. Got to a point where I was like, well, hey, there's a chance that if I hit something big, I can pay off my debts. So got to a point where pretty much from I think mid 2023 to about mid 24, I think there might have been 2 days that I did not bet, whether it was sports betting or online casinos. And I'm talking, if you take both of those together, I mean, there were probably days where I probably put in $800 into the online casino, and I had probably wagered another $700 to $800 in sports bets. And I kind of like, when I watch your stuff, like I don't talk about the dollar amount that I spent to people, because everybody puts theirs into their perspective, and they go, oh, well, I'm not, I haven't spent that much. Or for me, it's always been about behavior. That's what's led my problem, because ultimately at the end of the day, when I closed my FanDuel account, I was in the positive. Like, I was a good gambler. I was really a good sports bettor. And, even my buddies to this day, they always, some of them will ask me, like, wait, why'd you stop? Because you were actually pretty good at it. And just telling me, just the risks that I was putting myself into if it went south was where the problem really lied. And,
Interesting.
and that happened. And so I saw that into fruition, thankfully, with winnings, I'll say. I mean, I had hit a bet for a 5-figure win on a home run parlay during baseball season, and I turned around and lost about half of it. I paid half of it to some debt, and then my wife and I had agreed to put some money away, and I blew through that in about 6 days. And that was a, substantial amount of money, probably 3 months of, income type money.
While this is happening, what is your wife doing? Well, obviously, when you cashed out, you had told her that you were continuing to gamble, but she knew the whole time.
Not to the extent, and I think there for a while with the business and everything, there was a lot of understanding. And I will say, like, I'm lucky to have the spouse that I do, from the supportiveness that she has provided with everything, and some of the stuff that she's put up with ultimately. Just some of the lying, the deceit, and most of it just from shame. You don't really put it out there that I'm doing X, Y, and Z. And so it's not that you're directly lying, but you're not giving the truth. You're not being truthful with all your actions. And feels slimy. I remember talking to one of my best friends all the time, who he and I would bet together. And, we both got to a point where, I was definitely betting way more than he was, but we were playing the same stuff. And I just told him, man, this feels slimy. He's like, yeah, I feel the same way. He's blowing through money that his wife didn't know about, and he's putting money away from the bank account so his wife doesn't know, and things like that. And it feels slimy. So it's not that she knew to the extent, but she knew, because you're on your phone all the time. You're there, but you're not there. You're checking scores. You're going to the bathroom. Your demeanor changes based on your bet hitting, winning or losing. You're trying to hold it together because I got kids and my wife, and just act like the day's good, even though I know I just lost $1,200 or something crazy. And I remember, for me, night times were the worst, and the online casinos is what was bad. Sports betting. I said I was a decent sports bettor, but it was the behavior that ran me down the rabbit hole, because I would get online and the online slot machines, and I remember there were nights where I put in $300, I'd be up $5,000, and I would immediately blow it. And then you're
I
sitting
remember
there, and I remember being in such a depressive state that I'm in my living room at 3 a.m. in tears on my couch, like, what are you doing? Why. But it was like this euphoric state that until my money was gone out of my hands, whether I cashed it out or whatever, it was like you were trapped. And I remember always just feeling trapped in that space all the time.
I want to better understand your relationship with money. Do you feel like the rapid success of your business led you to change your perception of money? Like, what was your relationship with money like before and after the success of your business?
So I definitely think that the success of the business and the amount of money that I would see in my bank account definitely changed my perception of the worth of the dollar, so to say, right? Like when you're waking up and you have 40, 50 grand in a bank account, whether it's meant to go out to bills or not, which is half the problem. You wake up, you see it, and you're like, I haven't seen the invoice that I'm getting from my, another company. And the thing is too, is the nice part is I never spent business money. I made sure like we separated it. But it was when you see that, you're kind of like, oh, well, that's also mine. I have a buffer if something gets bad. And
Mm,
what it does though is it creates this like, hey, $500 is really like what's $500? Like, okay, whatever. Like this week I'm gonna make 2 grand, 3 grand. From the business. What does it matter if we lose $500 tonight? What does it matter if I lose 1,000? Like whatever, I'll make it
mm,
up. And so it turned into that. And I remember my wife and I went to Vegas one summer when I had the business, and I was excited. As a gambler, that was like, yeah, I can't wait to go to Vegas. And my wife, she likes to play, and she at times when we were going all the time, she definitely got a little hooked on the slot machines, and she told me,
mm,
and we talked about it. And I was always much more not as like, yeah, I think I have a problem. I'm like, I can stop if I want to. Like, I just like going. It's fun.
mm,
It was one of those. But I remember we took like 5 grand, and it didn't even feel. It wasn't even like fun. It was like it was.
mm,
I went there to try to win money, and that was where we left Vegas, and I was glad that you and I got to go, and we got away from the kids for a little bit and had, an adult trip. I didn't even experience Vegas. I got caught up gambling everywhere I went, and I can do
mm,
that at home. Like I didn't even get a vacation out of it. Like yeah, we saw the strip, but it was like, well, hey, there's a blackjack table here. Might as well sit down. Like, oh, we'll just do 100, and then it turns into
mm.
five, six, seven. You're there for 4 hours. Yeah, and meanwhile, my wife's like, hey, why don't you get up? I'm like, I'm on a heater, and then the
Mm.
heater dies, and then you walk off without any money, and you're like, okay, I should have gotten up because I was up
Yeah.
$600, and then you start throwing out $300-400 hands. We've all had those nights when you're a heavy gambler. You've all had those nights where nothing goes wrong, and so every time you're pressing the bet, then you're like, you finally get out of that state because you're either exhausted, you realize you've been there for 12 hours, and you're
Mm.
like, all right, cool, I left up 5 grand today. Like, we'll do this again another day. And
Yeah.
then when it doesn't happen, you're like, wow, I just lost 3 grand that I had.
Yeah.
And
It
it's
goes
just,
fast.
yeah, it does. And every time you press, you just press some more. You lose. Oh, it's got to turn. It's got to turn. It's got to turn. And
Mm.
it doesn't. And it's somehow always the casino's fault. That's what I
Yeah.
always found fun. It's always the dealer's fault who has no context into the cards at all. Those are the people that get the wrath of the people that thought it was going to turn. I just remember always feeling like I was in this euphoric state where if I wasn't aware enough to get myself out, I would go until physically there was no money in front of me.
I know that feeling, and I really resonated with what you said about like going somewhere and not experiencing the trip because you were just so hyper fixated on the gambling. Like that's what when I spent 3 months in Sydney, Australia. I didn't see one kangaroo. I didn't see one koala bear. I saw 3 beaches, but I saw those 3 beaches because they had pubs that were on the beach that I could gamble from and be on the beach and gambling, right? So I spent my whole trip basically in a casino in one way or another. Didn't really see any of the city at all. That's one of my bigger regrets. Do you have any like big regrets from your gambling separate to any kind of financial regrets?
I had, like I said, with my wife. My wife and I, when she kind of found out that I had blew through the money that we had put away from when I
Mm,
had hit that one, the one big win, so to say. And I had others throughout the time, but again, I was paying debts, and at one point, I was paying about $20,000 a month trying to pay off debts between personal and business that I had accumulated. So you can imagine you win 12 grand, you don't feel it because it's gone in 4 days because you just paid debts if you're doing it, doing the smart thing, or you blew it the next day anyway. She gave me an ultimatum, and it was at that point I was like, okay, yeah, like I got to stop. It was hard for me to feel what is life like without betting. And any downtime that I had or time by myself, it was like I could not stop thinking about playing. And some of that was as I had not committed to filing bankruptcy on my business yet. And so I was like, there's still a chance. There's a chance I could get out. There's a chance. Or it was like, hey, I already dug a hole. I need to try to win so that she doesn't know that I gambled. I'm able to pay this so I don't have to pull it from personal bank account. I don't have to pull more money or anything like that.
Gambling can wreck your finances, but you don't have to handle the recovery process by yourself. At GamFin, they help people struggling with gambling debt to take back control in their lives. Whether it's budgeting, debt management, or rebuilding your financial future, their experts are here with real support. Your money doesn't have to define you. Visit gamfin.org today and take the first steps towards rebuilding your financial future. Hope starts here. Check out the description of this video for a link to check them out.
The big regret I have is that I crushed a lot of trust with my wife, and I didn't really lean on her through the process of being better and telling her like, hey, I'm having a tough day today. I really am wanting to play. And that's what I do now. And so I remember even just last week, it was the weekend before 4th of July. We were over at a friend's house just having some drinks and hanging out, and the kids are playing. I just kind of looked over at her. I was like, I'm struggling today. She's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm just struggling with, for some reason, I just keep thinking I want to play. Like, I don't get it because I haven't played in a long time as far as like, doing gambling or anything like that. I mean, I had played like poker with some buddies, one night and that kind of thing. And that was the nice part is that I realized that tapping into my support system, that there is life after where you can still be normal, so to say, where it's like, if your buddies want to have a poker night, if you're comfortable and you have the support system around you, like, hey, you can go, but you have to be mature enough to know if you can handle that. That's the one thing that early on I wasn't. There were times where there would be something going on and I'm like, yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm going to go. I'm going to do this. And then I'd wind up gambling or I'd wind up doing something that I should have done. And it was like, I knew I shouldn't put myself in that situation. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have the support around me, this and that. And so it was just one of those things where her and I had, maintained communication. And the more that I, really leaned on her as far as just communicating and being open and saying, hey, I'm struggling today, like, and her validating, like, it's okay to struggle, like, it's okay to have it's for it to be hard, like, it's not always going to be easy, you're not crazy because it's tough, you're not weird because you can't get over this gambling addiction, situation, but you got to talk about it because if you leave it all in, you're more likely to succumb to what is there because it's hard to be your own person battling all these things, and I'm battling life, I'm battling a job, family, this and that, and then that gets added in. Your body ultimately, until you get to that full kind of dopamine reset, is going to continue to crave some of that. The problem is once you go back one time, it's back. And so then you got to redo it again and redo it again. And I remember, my buddy's bachelor party. This was kind of shortly after I had really stopped, and he was going to a casino. And I told my wife, I said, I think I feel good. I think I feel good. I said, but I need your grace that it's cool that I go. I'll stay back at the house if I can't go. My buddy, my best friend. So he was like, yeah, dude, whatever you got to do. And my wife, calls me, I don't know, 30 minutes before they're about to leave because I had texted her. She's like, you can go, but don't make me regret it. And and I will be honest with you, it was harder than I thought it was going to be. Like but it was one of those things where because I had talked to my wife, because I had that support, it was like, okay, like I'm good. Like my best friend was super supportive too. He's like, look, dude, if you need to walk out or whatever, like walk out, go. Don't do something you're not supposed to. So, but it was a good time. Like we had a good time just with the guys, and it was good to feel like again, like I mentioned beforehand, it was just good to feel some normalcy where it was like, okay, like I can still exist and not gamble and be fine. Like my buddies can talk about a spread for a baseball game, and I'm not like, oh my gosh, I got to go bet. And that was the hardest part for me to be able to adapt was just what does life look like without it? Because you get to a point where behavior it's so strong, and when you're playing and betting for almost a year every single day, and then continuing, it's like, it's like when it's like when you say like when you get divorced, it's like the other family, your partner's family became your family, or you kind of don't know what to do. Like that's what it felt like. I was like, what do I do? How do you even live without it? What are things that
Yeah.
people do?
I want to talk more about this point of normalcy. For my context, do you go to Gamblers Anonymous meetings? And when was your last time that you gambled?
I don't go to Gamblers Anonymous meetings. I did one time. I got some information, and what happened was there just a lot of meetings didn't line up. There wasn't one locally to
Gotcha.
me, and the onlines were
Yeah,
goofy
all good.
times. Last time I gambled, fortunately, it's been within the last like 4 or 5 months. And this actually scared me a lot because I did not realize it. I had gone to a neighbor's house and I had too much to drink that night for sure, and came home and I had this is when I had Gamban on my phone because I had found Gamban, I loved it, had it, and then it expired, and I hadn't played in a while. I was like, we're good. I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to worry about paying for it or anything and whatnot. And so for about a month. I was good, month and a half. Things were fine. Nothing was going crazy. And then out of nowhere, I wake up the next day, Sunday, everything was good. I wake up Monday, my bank account was in the negative. I was like, what? I still don't know if it was me or if it was, because Coinbase had that major hack that they had and something happened. But basically, like there was like $4,000 of crypto withdrawn or,
Mm.
drawn into my account and then drawn out. And obviously, you can't track where it goes. So I don't know if it went there or not, but it would have matched tendencies that I had. And
Mm.
so when that happened, I immediately was like, okay, well, I'm going to put Gambit back on my phone. And so I
Sure.
did find that through a partnership through Ohio, and you don't have to tell what state you live in, they have like a 5-year free membership. I did that. And so that's what I have on my phone now, just to protect me from any times where if I am maybe not in the total right state of mind, because it is ultimately something like if I do drink, it is something that I have to worry about thinking about and wanting to
Sure.
do and whatnot. But from a standpoint of like really truly knowing and being like there, it's probably been 8, 9 months, something of that nature.
Nice.
I would
That's
say.
awesome. And the only reason that I asked was just to build context for the audience. And the reason that I asked
Yeah,
about Gamblers Anonymous is because, like, if you take the book like very literally, they would
yeah,
say, don't talk to any of your friends that gamble. Don't go in or around gambling establishments. Don't tempt or test yourself. These are things that they say. Let's break it into the two things. So the first thing is like the normalcy in talking to friends about gambling. I think the book is totally outdated on that. There's
yeah.
so much gambling, there's so much conversation about gambling that it's almost impossible not to talk about it or not to at least run into someone talking about it, right?
Right.
So I think that you're right on. You're hitting the nail on the head right there with talking about it. You should reach that point where it's okay, where it's not something you have to run away from every time someone talks about it. With the casino one though, what was the thought process like when you were in there? You said it was difficult. Would you do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so like it's kind of to the point now where for me, and so some of this come from like I had mentioned, like I wound up through this whole process, I wound up being able to talk to somebody, a psychiatrist, and I was diagnosed with ADHD, and so ever since I've gone through that treatment, like I live in Indiana, I live over by there's a the Hoosier Park is over by where I live, the horse track, and so we like taking our daughters there, and it's at the casino, but it's a nice track. You go outside, they've got a bunch of stuff, kids can run around, play this and that. And so, if we go with any neighbors, like I don't mind being around anything, and I don't ever feel like I would get overzealous with gambling ever again. And it's the weirdest thing. It's just ever since I got diagnosed with ADHD and actually started treatment that like that's kind of changed. So I don't know if
Mm,
it was a lot of just the dopamine aspect and really wanting that like rush of just stimulation was
mm,
part of the want and the will. But I mean, as far as for the thought process there, it was most of it was just like watching my buddies play. It made me want to play with them,
mm,
And but I realized that hey, in this moment, you're not in a position to be able to play. You're not in the position to be able to sit down and take $30 and just play for fun. You're going to sit down and need to play 75 to $150 hands. That is not there for fun. And so,
right.
like I told my buddy, I said, look, I said, I'll gladly go. And I said, I won't ever gamble again until the day that I feel comfortable with putting $1 to just say I'm playing to have fun. So I think everybody's at a different point in kind of their walk of recovery. And for me, luckily enough, mine was so driven from just having very poor behavior. And that was the big thing for
Mm,
me that I felt like why I wanted to share my story because my story wasn't wrapped in 15 years of being at a casino and it was wrapped in I had a really poor financial situation and I put myself in a really bad spot behaviorally and it
mm,
developed so fast that I felt like not so much addicted, so to say, which I mean, addiction is feeling like you can't be without it, but it was more so like it's what I do. This is what I do.
mm,
What do you mean? Like, of course I'm going to put a bet in. This is what I do today. This is what I do at 11 o'clock. Like, I'm at home after work. I'm labbing, I'm labbing for tomorrow. Like, of course this is what I'm doing. I was so lost that I didn't know what in the world to do. It was like I became so dependent on just the behavior that once I
mm,
stepped back and stepped away and really started to look at things and give myself that time away, gambling is just nice just to have in case you're just not in the right state of mind. Like now, like I said, for me, like I don't even open up DraftKings or FanDuel or want to go to any of those. And, if my buddies are throwing lines around, I'm like, ah, cool, whatever. But as far as that, the open communication with my wife has been huge. Is just getting the understanding, her to know where I'm at that point, and just having the validation that it's all right. You're struggling through it. You still got it. You still have that struggle, because at the end of the day, I don't want myself to fall back into where I was. I'm constantly rebuilding the trust that I broke with my wife, because again, when you give somebody an ultimatum and I break it more than 4 or 5 times, the fact that she's still here is not only a blessing for me, but I know that she knows at the end of the day that I'm a better person than what that is and what that means. And a lot of it for her was like, look, I'm not so much mad that you did it. Like, I understand you're struggling, but you straight up lied. You didn't use me. You didn't talk to me. You lied about it. I confronted you about it. You weren't truthful because whatever reason why. And most of it's from shame, right? Like, I mean, I think any person who's gone through addiction and you relapse or something, like, you feel shame, regret. You knew it was something you shouldn't have done. And so now a lot of it for me is just, again, making sure that I'm able to feel like I'm living a normal life. And the craziest part is, for the longest time for me, like, it did not feel like I was normal or able to live a normal life without gambling, without having that. And that's what drove me back to do it every single time. It was just like, well, this is just part of life. Like, how am I not gonna play a parlay on football Sunday? Like, how? And I remember, being to my wife a number of times during football season, like, hey, do you care if I play $50? Do you care if I play? She's like, dude, you got to stop. Like, stop asking me. Like, you're irritating me. And not realizing, like, hey, instead of me asking her about trying to play and get her approval, just tell her you're struggling and know that you probably should not do that. And that's kind of where I go now. And there's still times where I'll be like, hey, do you care if I do this? You can. She's like, stop asking me. You know my answer. Like, why are you even doing that? And so it's like, there's still times. Usually, again, it's usually if, like, we're at the neighbor's house, or we've been out for the night and had some drinks, and that's all. And that's the main reason why I have Gambin, because I know that there's those times where, if I'm not in the right state of mind and I've had fun and I want to do something, I just don't want to put myself in that position. And so that's why that's been super awesome. Not so much just from the standpoint of, like, hey, not wanting to do it. I mean, I deleted all the apps off my phone anyway. I pretty much blackballed myself from most of the online casinos, because most of them, once you close your account, if you have them delete all information, they won't let you back in. So that's what I did, knowing that they wouldn't let me back in. I did that, and from advice from some people around me that told me to go the route that basically you put it in their hands that they can't let you back in. And so that's kind of what I did. So that keeps me from doing any of that. And then just using my support system around me. My wife is a major support for me, and I'm very lucky that I do. Like I said, I'm very lucky to have the spouse that I have, who's been reasonable with it, because I know it's not easy to deal with somebody who's battling with addiction and losing the trust and not being able to trust that person.
I'm happy that you're doing okay. I'm happy that things have gotten better and that you're not in those positions anymore, my friend. I want to thank you again for coming on and sharing your story. To anyone in the audience that wants to hear another story of someone in recovery from a gambling addiction, watch this video next, and let's keep getting better together, one day at a time.